cover about how to install Tailwind via CLI. Although Tailwind has a lot of ways for you to install it, you can use the post CSS if you're using preprocessor like SLES and SAS, or you can use Framework Guide if you're using Webpack or Next.js, Laravel for PHP, and a lot more. They have a lot of like frameworks supported. And actually, I already tried installing the Tailwind into the Webpack, but I haven't included in here. I'm not sure why. So anyway, you can use Framework as well. And Play CDN is just super simple. Like if you have just one landing page or you just want to test out how the Tailwind CSS designs work, then you can use the Play CDN. But the disadvantage of Play CDN is you cannot come up with, like, if you have a lot of like designs doing and you're using Play the CDN, it can make your site a little bit bloated unless if you use the CLI, because in the CLI you can minify your Tailwind, styles. So yes, in this video, we'll cover about the Tailwind CLI. So they have over 5 steps to follow to successfully install the Tailwind into your computer. Okay. So the first you need to make sure that you have a node.js installed into your computer. So you can go into the node.js.org and install any of this one. I recommend to use this one because, like, for sure, if it's a current version, you would experience some, bug fixes. So I usually use this instead of the current one. Okay, just install that and run it into your computer, and you can see to check if you already have a node.js. You can open your terminal, or I use get bushed. Just type in node and version. So currently, actually node.version. So yeah, so node.version is currently using 16.18. Actually, I'm using 16.18. I'm fine with that, but you can also use the 18.6. So it depends on you. And yeah, if you want this one as well, this terminal, you can type in git bush download that one. You just go in here and download the git bush. But I'm practicing really to use the command line so I can easily, easily remember syntax. I always forgot the common syntax for installation. So because I always use git bush. So anyway, so once you already have that, we can then, let me open again my git bush, and I'm going to go on my desktop and create a folder. Let's call it HubSpot template. Okay, and then if you type in HubSpot templates, again, this is super beginner's guide. I'm spoon feeding things, and if you think this is not, it's too basic for you, feel free to skip it. So I'm ready on the desktop. HubSpot templates folder is already created. Currently it's empty. So if I type in cd HubSpot templates, I'm already on the HubSpot template folder. And if I type in ls to see, there's nothing in there because our HubSpot template is empty. Now what I'm going to do is open my VS Code, Visual Studio Code, and it's not working. Anyway, let's go into the Visual Studio Code. This is an IDE, by the way. You can use different IDE, but like if you want to follow with this tutorial, feel free to use my Visual Studio Code. And you can download the Visual Studio Code by going to Visual Studio Code. Remember to put code at the end because they have 2 versions. There is a Visual Studio and there is a Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio Code is blue, while the Visual Studio is violet, okay, or lavender. Okay, and then what I'm gonna do then is go into the documentation. Let's follow the steps. Okay, so once you already have the node.js, we can then start running this command into our terminal. Okay, now Visual Studio Code has a terminal extension. You just need to click this one here on the menu called terminal, and right now I have Actually, I have a lot of terminals. So I'm going to use the git push. Okay, so yeah, so we will need to copy this, install, and then run it inside our HubSpot templates folder. And as you can see here, while it's running, it should generate a node modules folder. It might take for a while, but you can see there's a node modules, and that's why you need to install a node.js in order to make this work. So these are all like the components that Tailwind created for you, and it's dependent. Okay, and then it has a package lock and a package.json, and as you can see here, the Tailwind that we're using is 3.3.2 version. Okay, now let's run again the next command line, which is npx tailwind init, and it will generate a config.js for us, so we can configure the settings of our Tailwind. Okay, so go in again to the terminal and paste it the npx tailwind css init, and it will generate a file called tailwind config. Okay, now we're ready on the step 2. All right, so on the step 2, they are almost identical, except that the default config is empty. It has an empty path under the content, but in here they provided an example. So I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to explain with you later what this is all about. So yes, I'm going to copy that, put it over here. So basically this path would help Tailwind. Actually, I'm going to change this one to SRC. Is SRC. Okay, so basically Tailwind will use this relative path to scan which elements needs to be built or which inline styling needs to be built. You can see more information on their content configuration, and it says in here Tailwind CSS works by scanning all the HTML inside that path directory. You can add more if you want to, like just put a comma on it. What does it really do is, like, when you declare something into your HTML, Tailwind will only scan or build a corresponding CSS that is mentioned in the HTML. Tailwind will not build all the components unless it is called into the HTML. That will avoid your HTML, or that will avoid your web pages. So I'm going to create a folder there. So dot means it's a root directory, and then there's another folder, src, okay, which means source. So anything, this asterisk thing in here is just basically saying anything that is inside, any files that is inside with this tiers level will be exported by Tailwind in this config. So I'm gonna add a, let's say maybe template.css. No, template.html. Actually, let me put template HTML1. I'm gonna create a lot of templates because these are just super basic templates that I'm gonna use on HubSpot. So we'll add another CSS in here and CSS folder in here, and then to make things cleaner. But in this tutorial, they haven't mentioned to put a CSS folder. It's just based on your preference, and I'm going to explain that later. So yeah, so we're already on the step 3, and it's saying that you need to add the Tailwind directives into your main CSS file. And our main CSS file, I put it a folder called CSS. We can follow what they put in, which is input.css. You can use styles.css, depends on you. So, okay, so I'm going to copy this 3 directives. So to make our Tailwind decoration, all the styling, inline styles, in Tailwind will be readable in the browser. But right now it's still not readable because this directives in here cannot be, browser cannot understand it until we build it. Okay, that's why we're gonna proceed on the step 4, which is building our CSS classes. Okay, and you just need to copy this code in here. So what it's basically saying, so actually I have some few samples in here which is has some differentiation. So like input in here, the only difference with that, again, I'm really sorry if I'm too super beginner level. I'm just trying to explain it to those who are new to to like relative path and stuff. So basically, the only difference in this is this sample that they provided on the documentation of Tailwind is it doesn't have a CSS folder in it. Okay. So if we're going to try to run this one in our terminal into the CSS code, by the way, Visual Studio Code has its own terminal. You don't need to like put in, run it into the get bash itself. You can run the get bash terminal inside the VS Code. You just need to pick your terminal here. I have PowerShell, get bash command line, JavaScript terminal, and a lot more. Yeah, just 4. So I love using get bash. And yeah, so if I'm going to try to just, run this command into a terminal, and I put a CSS class, I clear a CSS folder, and see how's the error. So I'm gonna run that. So see that. Hold on, input with CSS. It should be an error. There should be an error. Okay, so it's saying specified input file, input source, input.css does not exist, because we put the input.css inside the CSS folder. That's why I added more layer in here to target the relative path, and it should be on the root file src css input.css. So yeah, just trying to explain with you what does that means. So I'm gonna add another layer called CSS there, and then we want to build this directives. We want to build the CSS right now, because currently browser cannot understand this. Okay, so we need to build that. So I would expect in this code it will generate. So it will generate a this folder inside the root directory. When I said root directory on the HubSpot template folder, it will create a this folder and an output.css file. You can use style.css file depending on you. Okay, again, these are just like depends on your naming convention. So I will refresh, run that. And as you can see here, there is a new folder called output.css. Now it's time to create. So on our config.js, we can then, actually, let's jump in here. So we already have that. Now, what I'm going to do then is I will add another HTML file. Okay, so let's click on, there's already a template.html in here. So I'm going to add an HTML boilerplate. Okay. Let's save that. And then, by the way, if you're using a Visual Studio Code, highly recommend to install a live server, so it's easy for you to preview things. I've already installed that. Just go into the extensions and type in live server and then install it. It's already installed on my end. Okay. Now, if I go in with this one, if I'm going to live server that, it should be an empty one with a title of document. And let's rename that Tailwind style to confirm that our HTML is working. The title is changed. Okay. Now we already done this process, I believe, this one. It's time to then put in this link that say CSS. Okay. So I'm going to go into the head section. And what is a good thing with the Visual Studio Code is it already have a guide for you. So link.css, and then we will target this relative path in here, because like this one has the CSS version in it. I mean, if we're going to target this, browser cannot understand that. That's why we are running the build in the npx Tailwind to come up with this kind of code where a browser can understand. So we will use this instead of this one. So yeah, to target that, it's a root directory with a folder and a CSS file called output. Okay. Okay. And then we can then start creating or using the components into our Tailwind. So let's say I want this hero section. You just need to copy the code here, click this one. They have a lot of templates, by the way. And if you're using a paid version as well, they have a lot of options for you. So like if we go into the templates in here, you can see some like this one. These are paid version of Tailwind. Yeah, just go into the browse actually go to the components one. You should able to see which one is a paid and which one is not paid. Like, let's give you an example. Like this one has a lock. It means it's a paid Tailwind version. Okay. So yeah, so I'm gonna copy that. I already copy it. I already copied the sample. This one required JS file, so you would expect some, like if you click any of this stuff in here, it would not work unless you put a JS on it. So just the purpose of this presentation, we just want to make the Tailwind work. So yeah, so let's just use this one. Click on the copy HTML. Let me know if you want me to come up with a configuration with a Tailwind CSS with a JS script on it. Okay, I'm going to copy that file. And if I run the template, it's working fine. And I just want to give you like 2 ways to, run or call the output.css. You can, let me just control C there. Let's clear that. I want to give you some other like scenario. So you won't get confused. So I have 2 link.css in here. So regardless of what CSS you put in, if you notice I have this in here, I'm giving you 2 example. Let me delete all of the this for you to understand. So let's say you want the dist or the output of your directives in Tailwind sit under the source file. You need to run this command, which is npx tailwind source css input source this output. So there is a this folder in it. So if we're going to do that, and then we click this, watch, you'll see there is a this folder there, which is output. Now, on the HTML file, the real path should have a this is not the right one. So on the HTML, we should be using this real path, this one, because we are putting our this, which I'm going to add more this folder there. We are putting our this, our output.css inside the source folder. Okay. Don't confuse in that. So I'm going to rerun it again to make sure that this is working. Okay. Okay, so it's not working because I added a CSS there. It should be just src this and then output. We'll hit it again. Okay, so let's troubleshoot why it's not working. Still broken, even though we put in the path. It's because we are still targeting the root directory. The template.html is already inside the folder. So what we should do then is just use this one, which is this. Actually, this is the right one. So we're targeting the root directory, which is the root directory of the template.html is the source, and the this and the output.html. Save that, and we should be good to go. Or if you want this to move outside the source file, I'm going to move that over there. You should be adding another folder like that. And it still works. Okay. So just double check the relative path. That is mostly the problem. And then the other thing as well, sometimes it doesn't work because of the config that you put in there. So if you type on this there, so let's say if you type on this there, basically what it's saying on that, I'm going to call in C. Yes. Control C, by the way, to terminate it if you want to terminate. I don't want a PowerShell. I'm going to use get push. Let's terminate that. And if you put in this there and you try to run, okay, so I'm going to run the Tailwind again. I'm going to rerun the output.css. while it's running, you'll notice that it's saying warn. While it is rebuilding, it's giving you a warning saying no utility classes were detected in your source files. If this is unexpected, double check your Tailwind CSS configuration, which is the Tailwind CSS. The reason for that is you are building the input.css into the source, like you are putting that into your into the source folder, but in your wconfig, you're targeting the root and then this directory. So always double check what you are targeting because they are connected to each other. To learn more about the content configuration, you just need to control and click that. So you have better understanding how content configuration works, okay? So yeah, just double check the warnings, and this content configuration from Tailwind has a lot of like informations for you to understand how it means. So never include CSS files in your content configuration. It's stated in here. Why it has an explanation why you should not be adding the CSS into your content configuration. So just double check this documentation, guys. I'm going to send it over. I'm going to put it on the link description. And yeah, let me know if you have any question. I'm going to come up a part 2 series of this tutorial, and we'll cover about the things that you can add into your Tailwind config.js. Like you can put scripts, you can put plugins, and a lot more. Thank you and have a great day.